Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Actually, it's a pleasure to have you all here, at the China National Convention Center, this magnificent building. I think this is a very much fitting place, for a discussion centered on innovation and collaboration. I'm Hong Liang Yang, the manager of investment solution of AIIB. I'm also your moderator for today's session. Decarbonizing infrastructure through innovative technologies, multilateral development banks in action. So we are gathered today to tackle one of the most urgent and complex challenges of our time, climate change. As we all know, rising temperatures, extreme weather, and ecosystem disruptions are already affecting communities and also economies around the world. In response, decarbonization, especially in sectors like energy, transport, urban, is no longer optional. It is essential. So our session today will explore how cutting-edge technologies can help us shift toward a low-carbon future. So we'll look at how these innovations are being adopted in real world and how we can scale them up with the help of private sector. So today, we are so fortunate to have with us an outstanding group of panelists who brings a tremendous wealth of experience and insight. Please let me briefly introduce them and invite them to the stage. The first one is Mr. Amitabh Kant. Mr. Kant is a former G20 Sherpa of India. He led major national initiatives like Startup in India and Make in India. He brings decades of leadership experience in economic policy and development strategy. Mr. Kant, please come to the stage. And secondly, let me introduce Ms. Beate Trunkman. Ms. Trunkman is the UNDP resident representative in China with over 20 years of experience in Asia and the Pacific. She specializes in sustainable development, international cooperation, and also public policy. Ms. Trunkman. And then I would like to introduce Mr. Nicholas Miravos. Mr. Miravos is the CEO and co-founder of Auris Material Intelligence, a platform optimizing carbon and resource use in infrastructure. He has over 20 years experience of international experience in road infrastructure and also construction innovation. Mr. Nicholas, please come to the stage. Finally, I would like to introduce Dr. Fei Fan. Dr. Fan is the chief planner at the China Urban Construction Design and Research Institute, a leading construction design institute in China. She has deep expertise in urban development, smart cities, and low-carbon planning. Dr. Fan, please come. So I encourage all of you to participate in the conversation. We will dedicate some time at the end of the session. Please feel free to ask questions, share your views, and help us shape a more sustainable and inclusive path forward. Let's give applause to our panelists. So after introducing our the panelists, now let us hear from our the esteemed panelists. So let me begin with you, Mr. Kant. Ms. Kant, drawing from experience leading India's national policy think tank, could you please share some specific examples of how India is harnessing innovative technologies like green hydrogen, electric mobility, or smart grids, and how other countries can learn from India's practice? Thank you.
So let me first thank you for this wonderful organization of this annual meeting. We're delighted to be here. Let me first say that decarbonizing infrastructure is the biggest commercial opportunity of our lifetime. And in India, we have used the size and scale of India to do several things. One of which is that in the last 7 or 8 years, we've been able to do close to 230 gigawatt of non-fossil energy. And we've been able to bring down the cost of energy very radically to almost 1/10 of what it was through transparent, competitive bidding. Our target is to have 500 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2030. But our aim is that we must become a major manufacturer of green hydrogen, where renewable is the stock, energy stock for that. And green hydrogen today is close to $5.5 per kilogram. Our ambition that we are working with is to bring it down to $1 per kilogram by 2030. So reducing the cost of energy, which is about 70% of the cost of green hydrogen, plus becoming a major producer of electrolyzers, that is cutting-edge technology, and then becoming the lowest cost producer in the world because India is climatically blessed. That is one of our key challenges. And we are doing this because today India imports about 180 billion worth of fossil fuel. Our aim is to move from fossil fuel to clean energy. That's number one. Number two, we have used the size and scale to transform lives of women in India. We have been able to provide 130 million women, the only country which has been able to provide 130 million women with LPG gas connection and made them move from firewood. They used to cook on firewood and made them move to LPG gas connection so that we could transform their lives. And to my mind, energy transition and climate transition is also about changing lives of citizens, which is very important. And the third is to push a huge, massive impetus to mobility, particularly two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and electric buses, because in India, 70% of the transport vehicles are two-wheelers. So our objective is to make 75% of the two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and about 50% of the electric buses, 100% electric by 2030. Now, all these three transitions have used technology in a very big way to pole vault. But along with the technology, there has been policy shift. And the policy shift has been through transparent competitive bidding, through ensuring that you have one grid across the country. Because if you have one grid across the country, you can produce renewable energy in the southern or the western part of the country and shift it to another part of the country. Europe doesn't have one grid, United States doesn't have one grid, but India has one grid. To my mind, that's a huge technological forward movement. The second is that the policy shifts have enabled private sector funding to flow in. All this transition cannot be done by government alone. If you do, so one of the things India did was to create a tripartite agreement between the central organization called SECI, the state discoms, and the Reserve Bank of India to ensure that private sector which comes in, their repayments are ensured through an escrow mechanism, which is very, very important. Private money coming in debt must be repaid. And therefore, this structure of tripartite agreement has enabled private PE funds, venture funds to flow in. And the transition story of India in renewable and green hydrogen is not a story of government. The government has acted as a facilitator, as a catalyst, and allowed private sector funding to flow in very large scale. So private equity, venture capital flew in, and that has enabled the big transition to take place in India's energy story. So the government must make policy changes. It must use technology to leapfrog, but ensure that the financial flows come in from the private sector across the world and India became a very attractive destination in the energy sector.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kant. Actually, from what you said, I bring up a few points. You emphasize, the importance of the, renewable energy affordability. Actually, when you bring the cost down, actually, more people can enjoy it. And, these actually related to what you said, the second point. It actually is a kind of inclusiveness of development. This is also very important. The third one is, the importance of, the green mobility to the low carbon future. And you also emphasize the policy shifts, importance of policy shifts, including the private sector mobilization. I think all these things are very important points, Let us hear from Ms. Beate Trunkman. Beate, because you are an expert in, in development in the sector for a long time, can you please introduce, what UNDP, is doing in the past? How, for example, to enhance climate resilience through infrastructure development, and what are the key lessons you want to share share today? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and let me join my fellow panelists in thanking AIIB for organizing this session and for having me, and also say happy 10th anniversary to AIIB. And as you said, I'm a development practitioner, so let me come at the subject from a sustainable development perspective. And for us, the way we see it is that infrastructure is in fact critical, or infrastructure development, to achieving the 17 Sustainable Development Goals for people and planet and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It's estimated, in fact, that infrastructure impacts up to 92% of all SDG targets. And infrastructure, we know, is also a driver of climate change, accounting, if we define infrastructure in the broadest sense, for 79% of greenhouse gas emissions. But it's also part of the solution, because we see that 88% of climate adaptation investments are actually going into sustainable infrastructure. And so therefore, developing sustainable infrastructure, I think, is a key part of facilitating the low carbon green economy transition, particularly in low income and middle income countries. And that will allow them to, if you like, leapfrog into carbon neutral solutions, skipping part of the fossil fuel stage that my colleague from India was also talking about. So UNDP, we engage with a large scale of partners, multilateral development banks like AIIB, but also international emerging development cooperation partners like China. And so you asked about my experience, and I'll give you two very quick examples of what we're doing. The first example is our Africa mini-grid program, which is operating in 21 countries to bring electricity to fragile and hard to reach locations and populations. We have today in the world still 733 million people without access to energy, and 2/3 of them are actually in sub-Saharan Africa. The other thing that we're doing is engaging, so it's investments into these type of tools, mini-grids, which are actually a different model to the one-grid approach because they're decentralized grids. The other thing that we're doing is working on South-South cooperation, in particular with partners like China and South-South and trilateral collaboration for the transfer of renewable energy technology and expertise. And there one example is an initiative that we facilitated in Ethiopia and Sri Lanka, where we've basically worked on technology transfers, but also on strengthening the policy capacities of partner countries. Regulatory frameworks, I agree, are extremely important. Targeted energy plans are extremely important to crowd in investments. So working with countries on these type of aspects. Since 2022, and that will be my last point, UNDP's work in this area has serviced 177 million people directly or indirectly around the world with the support that we are providing on sustainable energy solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beatty. From what you said, I pick up several, very important, the words. The first one would be, a target you shared, infrastructure, is going to impact, about 92% of all the SDG, targets. This is actually, very important. That shows how important infrastructure can be. The second, point is, you mentioned the infrastructure. If we do it in a right way, infrastructure is not only, contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. It can be a solution to greenhouse gas emission reduction. So this is, a very interesting point. Another, thing you mentioned, the importance of actually for renewable energies per se, the equal access and also the policy capacity strengthening, aspect of the discussion. I think all these things are very important. Now let's move to Mr. Nicholas. Nicholas, with your extensive experience in infrastructure, especially in transport sector, can you please share, some examples of sustainable and resilient projects you, have been doing before? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, I think we will get to examples through digitization, because digitization is offering a lot of potential to real hard results, I would say, with metrics and with numbers, and this is the question. It's complex to digitize and to get those informations at the scale of a project, but data and systems and methodological approach really help. Now to your question, this enables us, for example, in Uzbekistan to lower carbon emission on a 25 kilometers motorway, about 17%. That was really hard numbers on avoided carbon. So we talk about millions of tons of carbon here. So it goes very, very fast. I would mention also that we could, through the different iterations and simulations, because it's about digital twins simulations, we could simulate scenarios and construction methods that were saving 5 million liters of water. And this, for the local village here, was 1.5 years of water consumption. So again, this scenario was not on the table at start, but looking at different propositions, I would say, or different options, technically speaking, we could get to that result. And I will take a last number about circularity, because carbon emission in construction is a lot related to materials. One should know that 80% of the carbon, of the embedded carbon of infrastructure will just come from materials, depending on where the materials are, what are their carbon factor, what are their location, the way to transport them, etc. So on the circularity level, we can also lower a lot both the materials consumption, so natural resources, and also the carbon emission itself. In this same project that I was mentioning, we went down to 30%, just re-employing and making those materials usage smarter. I have maybe other example to share. Recently, in Africa, we were exposed to looking at a large project in Cameroon. And here again, the question was, how do we use digital and modeling to improve this project and make sure that this project will hit the targets? It was here specifically about resilience to climate change and climate exposure. And we could definitely screen out of 19 potential climate risks and exposure down to 7, and pinpoint on 5 particular measures that were making most of the impact. And again, this is about data management, data screening, data monitoring, because all those layers of information and data are connected to each other. So the carbon I mentioned is talking to the materials circularity, and the materials quality is talking to the climate resilience of the project and the durability over time, etc. So not having a system interconnecting all that together is very difficult in terms of study, and we really offer to interconnect those data under a systematic and the same approach. About systematic approach, I would like to say a word also, because the difficulty for carbon monitoring is consistency. We have so many numbers and we have so many methods and calculations approach and so between one project and another, how do we really compare? How do we even report on the same basis? So consistency is a real challenge. As the carbon going further will become a currency, you know, because of those carbon credits coming up, this currency should be on a very stable basis. And in order to get there, the consistency of the methodological approach, of the scientific methods, of the tools themselves should really be a concern. Because otherwise we will never get to this point of a ton of carbon becoming a currency, a real currency. So the quality of the measurement and the quality of the approach and the methodological approach is absolutely crucial.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholas. Actually, just now you mentioned from what you are saying, you know, I pick up, you know, the 2 things. The first one is digitalization, how to use digital technologies in the transport sector, and also how to use, you know, a systematic approach in, you know, to do sustainable and resilient designs. You know, if the data using, you know, can be properly monitored, if the, you know, approach are systematic, you know, which can guide us, you know, in doing the right things to reduce the carbon reductions, particularly in the infrastructure sector. Thank you. Now let me come to Dr. Fan. Dr. Fan, can you please share some examples of projects that demonstrate the integration of low carbon technologies and also circular construction principles in urban infrastructure? You know, how, you know, the emerging, you know, technologies like, you know, the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, you know, can be incorporated, you know, to advance, you know, the infrastructure development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Yang. Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to attend AIIB's annual meeting and share our experience on low-carbon infrastructures. Years of urban development and planning experience taught us the future cities will be sustainable, eco-friendly, and livable, smart in services and management, and in harmony with human and nature. As planners and designers of urban development, my colleagues in COCD and I have always been making efforts to build ideal future cities. Let me give you a few examples. In the pilot project of the Zero Carbon City in Hainan Boao, we applied low carbon and carbon sequestration technologies for carrying out China's low carbon strategy, such as restoring water system and recovering local mangrove community with nature-based solutions. At the same time, we established carbon sink wetlands by selecting local high carbon sequestration tree species, such as coconut trees and Indian almond trees that can grow naturally. And we use recycled woods and concretes to make landscaping pavements, benches, dustbins, and other urban furnitures to eliminate carbon emission. Solar panels were also installed on the roof for lighting. It is worth pointing out that it's the first project in China that passed the certification of German Energy Agency. The other example I would like to share our work in Shanxi Changzhi. It's a loan project by Asian Development Bank. This project includes the low carbon, climate resilience, and circular economy concepts. We designed a smart building according to the Chinese 2-star green building standard. In some other work, we according to the 3-star green building standard. And we adopted 5G technology. The building achieved carbon reduction of about 2,800 tons carbon dioxide per year. In addition, we adopted smart technologies in security, parking and payment, government services, online trading of industrial and commercial solid waste, as well as smart buses, tourism, and forest fire prevention. The project provided a foundation of a digitalized transformation for the enterprises in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fan. Actually, you mentioned the importance of several things, particularly on the recirculate the construction materials and also how to protect the biodiversity and how to do the smart planning, in the urban development sector. I think all these things are very important, And let's, go to another, let's say, topic. How MDBs can help in this, in the sustainable development. MDBs, particularly, like Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, we can partner with public and private sectors to identify constraints, prepare some solutions, and also share some knowledge and leveraging innovative financings. But all of these things are good wishes, but how to do it in reality is something we want to find out. So Dr. Fan, this round, let me starting from you. From your experience, how can MDBs, such like AIIB, can best work with our partners to prepare effective solutions to decarbonize urban infrastructure?
After many years of experience in urban planning and construction, we found it's very difficult to build an ideal low-carbon city. And I would say as an international financial institution for infrastructure development, AIIB is the most innovative and influencing platform in promoting low-carbon, green, and smart infrastructures. And it should be known, AIIB can not only provide funds, but also knowledge and technologies. And I would propose AIIB to enhance some aspects. And
For example, what aspects?
I try. First, I think by technical assistance or special grant, AIIB could support developing countries to make low-carbon master planning and special planning and detailed planning, and to streamline their investment and financial plans. AIIB shall supervise the procurement process and review project outcomes, and to make sure they make the original development goals. Moreover, AIIB shall oversee whether the loan project comply with the existing domestic planning. And the other one, I think AIIB will guide the preparation for the feasibility study report of the project, and focusing not only on the needs of the project, but also on the incorporation of low-carbon, green, smart, and nature-based solutions into project design and construction plans. And the third, I think AIIB should give more attention to summarizing experience and lessons and sharing knowledge. And the knowledge product can be one of the performance indicator based on the characteristic of the projects, especially those projects that may generate technical specifications, standards, or guidelines. My advice is AIIB to have a knowledge sharing corner or a window entrance on its website, and sharing globally the knowledge products of project features, design, schemes, achievements, and license. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, in the audience, including, some of our, honorable, AIIB management people, including my own vice president, so our speakers suggested, us to help, the members to prepare, the development plans. This is the first, thing. And secondly, to prepare a project feasibility study. Personally, I think this point is also very important because, when we see the development needs of our members is tremendous. But, the thing is, but when we go to the project team, go to the field, we found the bankable project opportunity are limited. So this, there is actually clearly, there is a gap. How to fill up this gap and really help our, members, is something we need to think about. The last point is knowledge sharing. Let us take a note on that as well. We will work on that. And then, Nicholas, so from your perspective, what are the, the low-hanging fruits, for AIIB to pick up in the members, which maybe, collaborate or partner with our, with the government or the private sector, players to accelerate the deployment of the clean and resilient infrastructure projects. And what are the, the areas which can be improved in the limited institutional capacity and regulatory framework in our members? Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to recall that development banks, AIIB, and I'm pointing at high here because they are first on the project. And here we have to realize how much impact a good practice can have. And on a project, an infrastructure project, looking at things early, looking at things at the preliminary stage and having the right practice at that level is carrying already 50% of the problem, at least. So for now, we probably look at decarbonization too late. We need to look at this earlier. And that's the first thing that is doable right now. Second is that tools and methods and capacities are there. We are far beyond the statement now. I mean, I think we did the statements 10 years ago, and now we are in action. So we are really doing it with the capacity, with the tools, with the expertise. And carbon measurement for infrastructure is not a fiction. We know how to measure it. We know exactly how to quantify that, and we can, for real, get hard numbers on that. The problem is that this knowledge is not well shared yet, and in the room, a few of us would know how much carbon is carried by this or that infrastructure. So it's not yet a very democratized number. So we need to work at this democratization of carbon understanding. And that is the role for all of us, I think, to have the right tools, to have the right methods, to understand. We know how much project cost. We should know how much project emit in the same range. Because again, this will become a currency, and this will become very important. So back to your question, what can AIIB do? I would say as large organizations, the fact of systematizing the approach and making it at scale, because it's not about doing a project here or there, it's really having an at-scale approach, because that would have massive impact, really. And we talk about decarbonizing by 50%. I'm just looking at infrastructure here. 50% is just at our hand, looking at the right things, doing the right things. This is not a fancy number. It's something we can just achieve. And this embedded carbon will be more and more important as the e-vehicle transition is going on, because the more we go in the model shift, the more the hard infrastructure, the physical infrastructure impact will be. So we need to take care of that from now, and you know, having a consistent, systematic, at-scale approach through partnerships, through infratech technologies. This morning it was a very good presentation on the infratech portal that you have developed, and where there are many solutions, many opportunities here to do good. So just having this partnership at scale, consistent approach would do a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, Nicholas, you emphasize the importance of partnership and also systematic approach. I think, you know, if we can, you know, I really agree with you. If we can do things in a correct way, you know, the current, you know, we can really improve, you know, the ways we are doing infrastructure, and which can already bring a lot of contributions to the carbon reduction. So Ms. Beatty, you know, so based on the UNDP's work in emerging economies, you know, how can MDBs, you know, such as AIIB, you know, partner with, you know, other agencies like international organizations, governments, and also private sector, you know, the players, to identify the barriers, the combined resources and projects, and to accelerate low carbon infrastructure? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think, you know, broadening financing partnerships that straddle from across public, private, corporate, and MDBs is absolutely critical, because I think by now it's very evident that the $4 trillion gap in financing needed for the SDGs annually, and this gap has actually been widening in the aftermath of the pandemic. It cannot be closed by public funding. And that challenge is, in fact, combined, I think, with a shifting landscape that we see in the development finance landscape. We see ODA drying up. We see countries increasingly faced with heavy debt burdens, where debt service payments crowd out long-term investments, public investments into development. We today have 6 in 10 people around the world living in countries that pay more on debt servicing than they invest in health and education combined. And we also have that added challenge of low-income countries facing comparatively less favorable conditions in accessing capital on capital markets. So to make up for the ground lost on the 2030 agenda, I think we need 3 things in particular. One is more affordable and long-term financing, and that's also taking into account the comparatively longer return the longer time span for return on infrastructure investments. So bringing down the costs of capital and expanding terms is, I think, critical to a solution. Secondly, we must scale up private investments into the green economy and the green energy transition, and scale up investments in innovation. And thirdly, we must make sure that we focus on low-income countries. If you look at energy investments, 85% of global clean energy investments go into advanced economies plus China, 85%. Only 15% go into developing economies for green infrastructure investments without China. So against that background, I think these broader financing partnerships are absolutely critical, and MDBs are, like AIIB, are a key factor in the equation. Now, as UNDP, we have been moving also in an effort to move from funding to financing towards partnerships with MDBs, like AIIB, where we combine grant and loan finance. You were talking about pipelining, and one of the discussions that we are having is how can we use our grant finance, including through the global environmental vertical funds, and pair that with loan finance from MDBs by helping to develop pipelines, bankable projects, doing feasibility studies. In China, we're also looking at bringing the China International Development Cooperation Agency into trilateral partnerships, because Sitka, in its outward-looking investments into developing economies, is also working with AIIB. And there again, UNDP, with our global platforms in 170 countries, can help do crowd-in finance and de-risk some of these investments. And the same goes for the private sector side of the equation. Private finance at scale will only be possible if we de-risk private sector investments into these new areas. And one example that I wanted to give you there is a work that we're doing outside the region in Panama, where we've used 20 million of UNDP finance and Global Environment Facility finance to catalyze 100 million in investments from capital markets, and that is then working with the Panama government also on incentives like subsidies, VAT reductions, and other capital market tools. So I think the magic word is partnerships and broad financing partnerships, and we look forward to continuing this work with AIIB and other multilateral development banks that we've started.
Thank you very much. I remember the magic word is partnership. Absolutely. Actually, development financing gap, as we all know, is the gap for development financing is daunting, is huge. We really need to line up with other the public sector players and also private sector players, to contribute for that. But these also raise my attention to one actually critical important perspective. in our project assessment, process. That's the financial viability of the development project. Just now, actually, when you are talking about, I'm thinking, okay, that actually raises, the bar, actually, for our financial viability assessment. Actually, for example, if all the, projects we are financing are financially viable, that means in the future, when they put into operation, they can be a, the cash generator, not a financial burden for our members. That probably can help a little bit, in addition to the partnership. Let me, turn to Mr. Kant. Mr. Kant, with your experience as India's, G20 Sherpa, what is your expectations, for MDBs like, AIIB? How should we, in what way, or at what aspects should we, work with the government and also private sector to scale up the low carbon infrastructure? And also, what kind of, the changes do you think MDB need to make and in order to increase, our support for sustainable development and climate goals by 2030?
No, that's a very important question that you've asked, because when other MDBs were constituted, neither SDGs or climate action was a world challenge. Both are two sides of the same coin. But when AIIB has been constituted, both these are critical challenges for humanity. And therefore, the challenge for AIIB is that for every dollar that it lends, it must be able to raise $2 from the private sector. There is no shortage of funds in the world. There's $150 trillion available with sovereign wealth funds, with pension funds, and the ability to do blended finance, our ability to do guarantees, and our ability to do pay for results is really the challenge for AIIB. The second is that AIIB must become the bank for the global south, because the world's growth is at its slowest since the turn of the century. But both according to the World Bank and IMF, 3/4 of the growth will come from emerging markets. And 3/4 of the growth will come from emerging markets because of young demographics. The population in China and India are young. In Asia, it's young. In America, the population has aged. In Europe, the population has aged. The young population of Asia needs young infrastructure. It needs climate-resilient infrastructure. And therefore, net zero has to be net positive for Asia. And this is an opportunity for us to create world-class infrastructure which is based on decarbonization. We must become the first countries in the world to industrialize and urbanize through a process of decarbonization, unlike the West. And therefore, the opportunity for AIIB is to ensure that we are able to de-risk projects, we are able to mobilize a pipeline of projects, and we are able to raise private sector finance to be able to fund for both SDGs and for climate action, so that we ensure that these countries grow and expand with a young population, but through a process of decarbonization. And that is, to my mind, the biggest opportunity for AIIB.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kant. From what you said, I now understand. Net zero is not a burden; it's an opportunity. This is actually a very encouraging words. So you also mentioned, the importance of de-risk, the projects. For how AIIB can de-risk a project in the future, how to raise private finance. I think all these things are very important. Actually 100% aligned with our, articles of agreement and also our corporate strategy. So thank you very much for that, to bring up these, valuable points. So regarding the challenges and opportunities, I think it's worth, a few more minutes. Let's go to the last round of the questions. I would like, to change, the way of asking questions. The first question is to, Dr. Fan and also Nicholas. So, from a strategic and policy perspective, what do you see as the biggest challenge in advancing low-carbon infrastructure development? How can stronger partnerships involving governments, MDBs, and the private sector can help overcome these barriers?
The biggest challenge is definitely the consistency, to have numbers on which we are solid. I will repeat myself, I'm sorry about that, but that's really the biggest challenge. What we've seen recently is large organizations going for it, just across the organization, having a single unique method and unique protocols of measure. And that already helped because that enables those large organizations to report properly. And that's important. Now, this being said, another challenge, or this being resaid, sorry, another challenge is to have the project monitored and looked at under a carbon footprint point of view, and not only the cost. So there are discussions at the moment into the direction of rated criteria, so that a project award would get to have a price and a carbon emission and a resilience to climate change and a circularity index, and a few more indicators than the price could really help shift the infrastructure to a more comprehensive approach. So this requires policies, of course, and this is a bit of alignment, but organizations of AIIB size and impact and influence in the region can definitely do that and get to that level of impacting the market.
Thank you. Dr. Fan?
Yes, we are facing many challenges, and from my opinion, I think the first challenge is some developing countries have a weak sense of planning as a first step for urban development, or they do have the plans, but often fail to implement them. Secondly, decision makers focus more on low carbon design and construction, but tend to neglect integrating low carbon concepts in operation and maintenance. And I think building an ideal low-carbon city requires full considerations and segmented work by sectors and a step-by-step construction process. And systematic low-carbon planning shall be the first step, and to set the targets for carbon reduction and allocate carbon reduction indicators based on the intensity of carbon emission in each sector. The design and construction must engage low carbon technologies and materials to achieve the targets. The second is it's important to build a strict regulatory system to guide and monitor the preparation, revision, and the implementation of the plans. Violating planning shall be seen as illegal to some extent, and to make sure the low-carbon urban planning is implemented according to one blueprint. And in addition, I highly recommend to focus on the effects of carbon reduction during operation. The construction period is only a few years, but the operation period can last for decades or even longer. So if we neglect carbon reduction during operation, all the efforts we made during the planning, design, and the construction will be in vain. So we suggest to apply smart and precise city management and operation technologies in different sectors so as to achieve the ultimate goal of ideal low-carbon city. And last but not least, we shall care about summarizing and sharing successful experiences. For instance, based on years of successful project experience, COCD developed knowledge products such as the Green Ecological Construction Guidelines and the technical guidelines on green and low-carbon city renewal. They are all valuable tools to guide the development of low-carbon city in China. Thank you.
Thank you. From you two's, actually response, I can feel, you emphasize the importance of, the policy reforms, because, policy reforms can provide an enabling environment for the, public financing and also for the, private sector financing. That's important. And also, second point is, we should not, see, the carbon reduction, from only one stage. We need to see, from, the planning stage, implementation stage, design stage, and also, when we look at the whole, the project cycle, probably we can reduce the carbon, in a much wiser way. And now it's time to turn to, Mr. Beatty and Mr. Abtamakant. Actually, the question for you two is, based on your experience, what are the most important elements that policy and regulatory frameworks should consider in order to promote, innovative ways, for sustainable development?
I think I'll come at it from the challenge also, and Niklas said consistency, and I would say integration. That is the biggest challenge that I see, policy integration, to really move us out of the silos and make sure that we drive the low-carbon, sustainable, inclusive economy transformation in an integrated manner. And that, for that to happen, because we know that development challenges don't exist in silos, right? They reinforce each other. And so siloed approaches are not the solution, right? So, but to get out of the silos, you need different incentives, right? And you need basically a shift in policy and regulatory frameworks. And as UNDP, to give you one example, we've been working with partners on more coherent, comprehensive approaches to bridge the gap between climate and nature investments. So as part of the work that we are doing with countries on preparation of their next climate action plans, the nationally determined contributions. And we do that in 120 countries around the world, advising the NDCs. We're looking also at better integration of climate action and biodiversity protection as the flip side of the same coin. And we have by now 35 countries that actually have in their NDCs integrated targets and indicators for both climate action, mitigation, adaptation, and biodiversity protection. But I think plans national plans, if you like, need to also be backed up by regulatory guidelines and standards. And so in that department, we are working with countries on regulatory innovation, for example, of financing tools that can mobilize finance towards biodiversity investments. One example is our biodiversity finance initiative, which looks at also integration of biodiversity criteria into national and local development plans. And that initiative, which is active in 41 countries around the world, has by now catalyzed $1.6 billion of investments into nature. In addition to that, we also work on innovative financing tools, speaking again about policy innovation. And there, one approach that we are using is broadening the definitions from green to sustainable SDG finance, and developing new financing instruments for SDG bonds that can be issued on capital markets or by sovereigns that can mobilize finance at scale towards the SDGs. So we've developed SDG taxonomies, we've developed SDG investor maps, and as part of that exercise, we have by now $31 billion in SDG bonds, sovereign bonds, issued over the last few years, mobilizing finance towards the SDGs. So I think the answer to your question is integration and innovation, policy integration and policy innovation. And again, AIIB as an MDB is a critical partner here that we're working with on this type of broader approaches.
Thank you. Thank you. Policy integration and policy innovation. Very important. Ms. Kant.
So first and foremost, decarbonization of infrastructure will not happen without a policy framework which will enable private sector to come in and attract private financial flows. That is critical. And this requires a policy framework. Private finance will not come for charity. It will not come in for its love of climate. It will come in if projects are de-risked, if they are able to get a rate of return. And that means the countries have to build a policy framework, de-risk projects. Secondly, the example of India demonstrates that we use size and scale. We procured 400 million LED bulbs and we brought down the price to 10% of what the original price was. And that led to manufacturing in India. We did a tender of 10,000 electric buses. We brought down the price of electric buses 15% lower than fossil fuel. The next tender is of 30,000 buses. The third tender will be of 100,000 electric buses. So use the size and scale to bring down, push demand and bring down prices. That's critical to my mind. And the third is use technology to leapfrog. Traditional technologies will not enable you to make a shift. Use cutting-edge technology to make a leapfrog into the future. Get into areas of green hydrogen, get into electrolyzer, get into electric mobility. That's the future. Get into the final technology. Don't get into the intermediate technology. Getting into hybrid cars is like getting into typewriters in the age of smartphones. And therefore, get into the ultimate final technology. That will enable you to technologically leapfrog. And last and foremost, use AIIB to work with private sector to ensure great flow of funds into your country. The Global South must benefit from AIIB and in the process of decarbonizing of its infrastructure. This is the best multilateral financial institution to decarbonize infrastructure.
Thank you very much. Actually, you really give some very powerful and strong words. The first license I pick up is, private finance will not come for charity. They are coming for financial returns. This is actually the fact. And the second one is to use the size of a scale to bring down the cost. So this is a way to de-risk the projects, right? Project investment. The third one is using the cutting-edge technology to leapfrog into the future, not using the traditional technologies. If you're using traditional technology, you are always staying here. And the last one is, is AIIB is the best MDBs. We can work with, the private sectors to mobilize the investment, to always stand with the global south, to push the sustainable development to the future. I think, we already, have a lot of discussions. Let's hear from the audience. We have a few minutes for questions. Microphone, please.
I have a question. Any project profit come from price? My question is, how to use government hand and marketing hand together to manage the energy system, price system, just like electricity price, natural gas price, hot price, carbon price, and so on. Thank you.
Ms. Kant, would you like to take that question? Actually, can you, in short, can you, repeat your question again? You mentioned how to use the government hand, also use the private, the market mechanism to lower down the price, right? Okay, how to, reform, the energy tariff system wisely. Let me put it that way.
The intellectual in the panel is the UN resident representative. She understood the question, so she'll respond.
I'm not entirely sure whether I understood the question, and when it's about energy tariffs, I think it's again about, the price signals, basically. And obviously, like with all nascent technologies, and we've seen this in a lot of countries, right? You subsidize first to make it competitive. And once it's competitive because of scale, and we've seen this in India, and we're seeing it in China also, then it draws the investments, right? Because nowadays is actually the business case and the market signal is for investments into renewable, not into fossils, because you have the long-term liabilities of fossils. So I think maybe that is what was meant was the question, but it's again, it's public-private partnership. It takes vision, it takes investments from the public side, it takes the policy, so it takes the investment signals from the public side, it takes the policy signals from the public side to then change price structures.
I think that's a very, much comprehensive, answer. You need to, the government need to work with the market, using, from the both sides, to make, the renewable energy investment more profitable and also the energy tariff more affordable. Let's, go to the second question. This gentleman.
Thank you very much for the discussion. Actually, my question is about climate justice. Because we know carbon emission is a problem who all the world suffer from. But this problem, in order to be fixed, need money, and we heard about like how much finance gap we have. And you talked also about policy frameworks. So my question is, what are the policy frameworks in MDBs and AIIB, and also in UNDP, to make sure that the countries who are causing this problem, like this carbon emission, are taking the right responsibility about that. And I'm not talking about just maybe annually or the last 10 years. I'm talking about starting when the problem started until now, because this problem maybe started in the 18th century. So my question is about how to ensure climate justice through policies. Are there policies to ensure that? Thank you.
Yeah, you would like to take the questions?
So on this issue of climate justice, there are two aspects of it. First, let me touch upon the international component of it, because 88% of the carbon space has already been occupied by the developed part of the world. And what they had committed to in terms of financing the developing world at COP21 in Paris, they have not lived up to it. India's per capita emission is 1/10 that of the United States of America. Now, we can keep asking for finance. That's a separate issue to be fought separately with the developed part of the world. But my view is that decarbonization is a commercial opportunity. It's the biggest commercial opportunity. The global south must seize this opportunity. If you do not seize this opportunity, you will be left behind. And therefore, in the in all these areas of growth, if the global south takes the lead to bring policy changes, bring technology, bring private finance, you will leapfrog in a very big way. You will create infrastructure that is climate resilient, and therefore, irrespective of the climate justice, take leadership position. That is what I believe in, that the global south must become the leader. The second is that there is a need for just and inclusive growth. And just and inclusive growth means that we should ensure by policy measures that in India we have demonstrated that solar energy today has become cheaper than thermal energy. We are not saying that you do not do coal mining, but we've made it commercially more viable for solar renewable energy, and that is better for humanity. And we've done this by a series of policy measures. We did away with wheeling charges. We did away with interstate transmission charges. We brought policy changes so that renewable becomes cheaper. And by pushing for green hydrogen, we will make green hydrogen cheaper than any fossil fuel. That is the challenge we have taken upon ourselves. So push for change, push for size and scale, and make clean energy cheaper than any other form of fossil fuel. That will transform the lives of citizens in your country.
Thank you. This lady. Yes, yes.
Thank you. So my question is on, we spoke about decarbonization primarily around the areas around energy industries, mobility, which are the usual suspects. I would like to hear your thoughts on the role of AIIB as it evolves and also is looking at evolving towards even social infrastructure. How can we accelerate the decarbonization of social infrastructure such as hospitals, schools, and so on? And particularly, we see that in the past few years, there's a huge momentum around that globally, which is moving from global to regional and now the national level. WHO Attach particularly has come out with a lot of frameworks, guidelines on climate, low carbon health systems, sustainable supply chains in healthcare, so on. So would love to hear your thoughts on that. And the second part of this question linking to it is, as an MDB which has members across 110 countries, regional and non-regional, countries in global north are already on that path. Within social infrastructure itself in terms of decarbonization, how can best practices be scaled from there, the learnings from there, working with those client countries, and then bringing that to the global south so we can, leapfrog this part of the world as well. Thank you.
Nicholas, would you like to?
I can answer partly, just maybe mentioning a partnership that we have, because partnership is everywhere, but public-private partnership, and I just want to mention the partnership we have with UNIDO, looking at Ivory Coast in Africa, where optimizing large project, the typical finance large project, optimizing them at the benefits of social infrastructure. And this is a financial mechanism which is quite innovative as well, but there is potential and there is optimizations to take in everything we do, and this is our responsibility to channel it to social infrastructure. So then, in this case, we particularly look at social roads and rural roads and agricultural networks and everything about agribusiness and everything related to roads and local. But same could go to hospitals or pure social infrastructure as well. So my point is that there is a relation between what we do today and the immense potential of those infrastructure. And this is our responsibility to shift it also to the benefits of people. The program, by the way, is called Roads for People, just to illustrate that. The second part of my answer here would really be that AIIB has the influential power to help countries look at their processes at scale as well, because it's not only AIIB at scale, it's also countries at scale. And here, with this same partnership that I was mentioning, we have this ambition to look at the whole thing, the whole network, the whole roads of one country and make it turn to social impact.
Yes, thank you. As time is up, thank you all for your, active participation and also thoughtful engagement. As we wrap up, this seminar, I believe, we really, accumulate several, the very much valuable insights. One clear takeaway is, MDBs, such as AIIB, do have a role to play in this process. In order to push the decarbonization, agenda forward, the road isn't simple. But with partnership, with policy integration, with policy innovation, with the systematic working approach, of course, with fresh thinking and also determination, it's absolutely reachable. So let us, to keep the momentum today by combining, the partnerships, technology, and finance to drive real change and shape a more sustainable future for tomorrow. Let's give, before I close the session, I would like to thank all the panelists again. And the last activity is to take a family photo. May I invite VP Pandey and also DG Hong Kim to take the photo? Okay, thank you. Panelists first.